Hello, folks. My name is Ted. You know my channel. Today's topic is one that is very near and dear to my heart. I was thinking about a number of different topics I wanted to do, and not all of them have to do with the computer stuff. Some of these things go back to things I've mentioned and also various viewer comments. And one of the comments that kind of caught my eye, or that I thought was great, was, a number of times I've kind of mentioned that perhaps my 20s would have been better spent if I didn't, go and live in a mountain town and snowboard. And it's a bit of a question I've been wrestling with, actually, that I could have spent that time, doing something that could perhaps over the long term have been better for this career that I'm in now. So this is my attempt to actually play the devil's advocate on that and say, actually, maybe not. Maybe there was actually a lot of value that I got out of spending my 20s as a snowboard bum. So this is my attempt at doing that. So I'll give you a little bit of context. I graduated university, this is a while ago, probably in like 2005, 2006. Bachelor's of Philosophy at University of Colorado with a minor in computer science. And I didn't really know what to do with my life at the time, actually. I wasn't really interested in a lot of things, which I know that sounds a little bit odd. I think I was interested in computer stuff, but I was perhaps interested in games, but I don't think I had really found my passion for games. I wanted to be a writer, okay? And that sounds very, it sounds just so naive. And I saw a lot of people that were interested in writing, and one of the pieces of advice that was given to me was, if you want to be a writer, you should go and do interesting things with your life and then write about that. And that really struck me, actually. I thought that was actually really good advice. And so here we are. I graduated college, didn't know what to do with my life, wanted to write about something, but I didn't know. And I had all this, philosophy and computer science background. Wasn't really sure what to do with that either. So I decided out of a whim that I would go and become a snowboarding instructor at Winter Park in Colorado. And I just wanted to do it. I just thought, I knew that I really enjoyed snowboarding because every single weekend, whenever the season was on, I would go up. So I was in college, I was going through a computer science program, I was working a job, and every weekend I went snowboarding. And so it was like all of those things. And it was actually really difficult. Well, I don't know. That was an interesting part of my life in some other respects, because I was taking these classes and I was doing all this snowboarding and I was working this job. And the funny thing was that it's like the more busy that I became, the better I seemed to do. You would think that with all that coursework load and all these things that I was doing, that it would somehow be too much for me. But actually, it seemed like the more that I loaded up my plate, the better I handled it. And so that's been a bit of a theme ongoing in my life, actually. It seems like I just do better when I do more stuff. So I finished college and I moved to Winter Park, and I became a snowboarding instructor. I did that for about 2 years. And I had a bit of a problem with that particular line of work with respect to snowboarding, because it really did not afford me much in the way of actual snowboarding time, because you spend like 5 days, teaching the kids to snowboard. And so you don't actually get time during the day to snowboard. So that was my chief problem that I had to solve. So eventually I decided that the snowboard instructor thing wasn't the right thing. and that actually working jobs at night in order to snowboard during the day was the better thing. Of course, there's a lot more competition for that kind of thing because everybody wanted those jobs. They wanted the restaurant job, but only at night. They wanted the bartender job, but only at night, so you could go snowboarding during the day. By the way, this picture is of me in Breckenridge, kind of close to the peak of my abilities. That trick is a switch underflip 540 that I did, and that jump that's the first one in their big park. I actually set up this camera with my friends. So I set up the camera to have this kind of cool foreground bit of noise there. It's kind of got like this multi-layered effect. I like it. But yeah, my friend Brian took that photo. I've got so many of these, actually. It's great. Let's see. I will show you this one too, because I love this one. Okay, so continuing on. This is actually in Mount Hood. In order to even come up here, I had to work some jobs in restaurants. So I worked at the Cascade Dining Room, of all places. Hey, how's it going? So I worked at the Cascade Dining Room in Mount Hood, Oregon, and that was my restaurant server job. And I'm just trying to highlight that I had to work all these jobs kind of as a side thing in order to be able to go snowboarding. So we would finish I think we would finish the lunch shift, and we would get off around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. And then instead of just going home, me and my friend Curtis, that's the guy in the green kind of off in the distance, and a few other people, we had some skier friends that would do it too. We'd have all our gear on, and then we would hike up the mountain, and just at sunset. And so we'd set up these beautiful sunset photo sessions. And so this is my camera that actually captured this. And again, I set up the tripod and stuff. The tripod for the camera was actually located on the landing zone of this jump. And so you had to be kind of careful about not hitting it. So that was interesting. That's me doing, I think, like just a stylish 360. And I've got my in the summertime you can't really wear heavy gear, so I've got just this t-shirt on. So we always ride with a t-shirt in the summertime, and it was always after hours. So the way that I got good at snowboarding was by making sure I could set aside the time to do it. That was the most important problem to solve. And the only way that I could really solve that problem was to try and find these jobs where I would work in the evenings or at night or in kind of these off hours times. Gradually, over time, that sort of thing evolved, because eventually what I did was I started doing these online freelance writing contracts. And so I would just pile myself up with freelance writing work. I was starting to get good at writing, actually. I was getting much, much better at it. I was able to deliver these things to various clients, and they liked my work. And that's towards the very end when I got to be at my peak snowboarding ability. This is pretty close to the peak. See if I have any others. This is pretty close to peak. Another shot at Breck. This is a backside 540 with a grab that I did. So this would have been a while ago, but at the peak of my abilities, I was working at night for about 3 to 4 hours, just doing freelance writing gigs. And then I would go snowboarding during the day, and that paid enough money to kind of cover my expenses while I went snowboarding. And it worked. It totally worked for quite a while, actually. So we have a question. What kind of clients would you work for as a freelance writer? Oh gosh, it was like all kinds of random things. Actually, there was one client he was writing a blog about photography. And I actually knew a fair amount about photography. That's how this picture got taken. Because again, I set up the camera for it. So I would just write all these articles for beginner to intermediate photographers on how to do photos. And I'd write like 3 of them a week. He didn't really pay me a lot to do it, but it was kind of enough to sort of get by. That was a major client. It was a lot of things. It was like website copy. It would be, there was one project that I had that was just like, talk about total creative explosion. It was actually insane. It was like, I think for him, for this, it was a skateboard product company, and they needed 5,000 skateboarding product descriptions written, and they paid me like by the description. And so, here I am, I'm a snowboard bum in my like apartment that I'm sharing with like 5 other dudes in Breckenridge, and I'm writing all these 5,000 skateboarding product descriptions. You start to learn the creative bone after that. You start to figure out how to just let the ideas flow. That was a cool thing, and I got a lot of good experience out of that. Just learning how to write and just in creativity generally, because how many different ways can I talk about a t-shirt with an alien on it? That's what I had to do to come up with all of those. So my point is, I was able to get that good by working these jobs. And so, I can show you all these pictures from that time, but that's just to kind of set the backdrop. Eventually I stopped really being able to do this as seriously as I was, for a lot of reasons, because my career kind of moved on to something else. I had moved on to software, which takes up more, it's more full-time. It pays more of a real living wage. And so they kind of expect you to be around more during the day for that kind of thing. I mean, if I really wanted to, I could probably still go and do some of this stuff. I could still probably go and rent a place in the winter and do all of it. But then it would take away from the thing that I'm pursuing now, which is games. So it's kind of one of those, you have to pick what you want out of life at that moment. So I got pretty good, and we'll talk, about some of that. I was not pro. I was not doing it for a living, but I got up to where I was, the biggest trick I did was like a double rodeo 900, where it's like basically a double backflip with like a 180 at the end. And I actually managed to put that into a run. So the run that I had at one point in time, very briefly, was like, I could do a frontside 720 with a grab into a double rodeo 9, late 180 out. And that was, I did that maybe a few times, and my friends were like, whoa. And I even remember a coach coming up to me and being like, you've really improved a lot over this season, because he saw me kind of struggling through that season. And then after that, I learned a few things. I realized I probably wasn't really going to become pro, and that was okay. And I needed to move on to something else in my life. And so software kind of became that thing. So, but what I want to actually do is, like I said, be the devil's advocate here and say that perhaps during this time when I pursued all this stuff, I may have learned a few things. So here are some of the things that I think I learned. So first thing, nobody will give you permission to go, okay? So when I show you these pictures of the terrain parks and the terrain park jumps that we had, this actually was in the big park. At Breckenridge's medium park, the medium line jumps, if you've ever been there at, say, 12 o'clock, like noon on any given day during peak season, it's just packed full of people. And they all want to hit the jumps. They all want to go. And so it's probably like 20 people just like crammed into this small area, all trying to hit this jump, this like medium line of jumps. And it's a highly competitive environment in many ways. It's a lot of people with sharp elbows. And so the thing that you learn is, if you stand there and wait to go, you're just never going to go, right? And, they say all these things, like there's all this stuff that's posted, like placards and signs that are like, be respectful. And like, and generally I try to be respectful. So don't take this as like me somehow, saying, oh, be an asshole. I'm not. And what I'm saying though, is like, in spite of all those rules, at some point, eventually you're just going to have to like decide that you want to go. And you'll try and be respectful, but like you're just going to have sharp elbows, and you're going to have to get out there and do your thing. And nobody is going to give you the nod to go ahead. Nobody will give you permission. And I think that this generally is just more applicable than ever in life. This is not just about snowboarding. It's really about anything that you want to pursue in life. Nobody's going to give you permission. You really do just have to decide to go and do it. And say, for example, you want to work on a game on the side and you have a job, your job's not going to give you permission, right? Like, they're just not. They don't care about your pursuits, right? Now, some of them might. Some of the maybe occasionally you might want to talk, but you have to take that kind of stuff into your own hands. You just have to decide, hey, this is what I'm doing, and maybe that means you quit the job, or maybe it means, who knows what it means. I think one of the first seasons when I was out snowboarding, this is when I was an instructor. She was very well-meaning, okay, but she kind of like almost tried to like have an intervention with me or something. So she's talking to me and she's like, if you spend too many years of your life in your 20s to spend too many years doing seasonal jobs, nobody will want to hire you. And I remember at that time very lucidly telling her, like, look, like, here's the thing, miss. Because I was working I was a snowboard instructor or whatever. I was like, look, I know that someday I am going to die and I want to do these things. And I may never get this chance. And I don't care what anybody thinks about what I'm doing. I'm just going to go do it. And so, if that makes me not hireable by some people, okay, fine. Like, this is what I'm doing. Thank you. See you later. Have a good day. And I really just think that is how you have to look at any of these things that you're doing. At some point, you will have to decide to take what is yours. You will have to decide to go and do it, and nobody will give you permission to do it. So, lesson number 2. It's lonely at the top. So, showing you these big jumps here, right? Okay? There's a funny truth about that. You might think, oh gosh, these big jumps, best terrain park in the world, Breckenridge, Colorado. But actually, the big park is a lot less busy than the small park. And it's because people are scared to death of those jumps. And they should be, because they're terrifying. So what ends up happening is that as you get better and better and better, and as you start hitting these big jumps more and more, eventually you get to a point where you sort of start to rise above the riffraff. Now I'm not in that sharp elbows kind of a situation, because I have carved out a space for myself. I am up there. I'm hitting these big jumps. Some of the people that are going through are actually professionals, right? They actually do this for a living, and you can sort of bump elbows with them. And it's overall a much more relaxed pace, because I'm not fighting with people to hit this jump, right? There's maybe like, in this big park, there's like 5 people at any given point in time. And they are just casual as hell, because they don't want to go any more than you do, man. Like the guy next to you, he's going to be doing like some kind of double cork 1260 whatever thing. Like, he doesn't want to go. So yeah, he'll give you the nod to go ahead. You go kill yourself. That's how that works, my friends. So it's lonely at the top, and sometimes I would have shown up early before anybody else. And that's kind of dangerous, because if I hit that jump and I crash, there's nobody to witness it. There's nobody to help me. And so you almost kind of can't be too early to the big park, because nobody will help you if you crash. And you need people to be seeing what you're doing for it to even be a safe environment. Okay, moving on. So have a goal, accomplish it, and then leave. Seems pretty simple, but the best people that I knew in skiing and snowboarding, the pros, my friend Katrina, they would have some kind of goal in mind when they go snowboarding, some trick that something that would expand their abilities, and then they would do the trick, or they'd work towards it. They'd maybe take a handful of warm-up runs, and then they'd just work on that trick, and then they'd go home. They might cool down a little bit, have a beer, whatever, like for like a little bit. But they basically came with every single day they came with an agenda, and they accomplished the agenda, and then they just freaking left. And oftentimes, my friend Justin, Justin was pretty much a pro. Justin Morgan was competing in a bunch of different I think he was competing in Dew Tour at one point, and he would show up. We'd take laps for like maybe 3 hours, and then he'd get into his biggest stuff maybe about an hour and a half in, something like that. He'd do a little bit of warm-ups, and then now it's time for my switch backside triple cork 1440. And then he tried a few times, and okay, let's take a few fun runs, and then he's gone, and then we'd go and hang out and have coffee later. That was Justin. So I guess what I'm saying is this really casts a certain kind of light on the work world that maybe you haven't seen. I got to see it snowboarding. There's just a lot of people that don't have a fucking goal. Sorry, they don't have a goal. Like they don't actually think of a particular thing that they want to accomplish, show up and then accomplish the thing and then leave. A lot of jobs are kind of set up to where you're just supposed to work the 40 hours and they just have tickets that you do, right? And it's not, I'm sorry, but that's so freaking mediocre. That's nothing like what I experienced when I did this kind of thing. We didn't just, maybe I'll do a 180 today, maybe a 360, whatever. No, it was always, today I am working on my frontside 720 and we're going to get video footage of it. And I'm going to do my best to accomplish that trick. And I'm going to see how many I can land. I'm going to figure out what's wrong with it. And then we're going to finish it and we're going to go. We're going to go home and maybe review the footage later. So have a goal. Oh, and the same would apply for games. I would say anytime you sit down to work, have some particular thing that you're driving towards, attempt to accomplish it. If you have problems, figure out why. But basically, go for that's the thing. And when you're done, be done. Okay. You're as good as your friends. The right friend group can push you to do great things, or it can keep you stuck repeating the same day over and over again. Strongly believe this. My experience snowboarding absolutely says that this is the case. As I got better friends, and my better friends helped me get better. I'd like to think that I helped them get better, but we'll see. I mean, I was okay. I was not that great at snowboarding, really, compared to what other people around me were doing. But those folks around me really did push me in some spectacular ways to do some of these things. And it's because they just had much more ambitious aims in mind. That's just how they thought. They just thought with a certain kind of ambition. They weren't here to just mess around. And so once we got kind of working with each other, we started pushing each other to do crazier and crazier things. And it was all just such an awesome experience. And I think that now about making games. I'm pretty careful about who I associate with. I want to be associating with people who genuinely intend to push things forward in some interesting ways. Not people who are just trying to be safe. Not people who are just trying to, it's like, yeah, okay, I guess you can just pay the rent with some of your games, and that's okay, but that's not why I do something that I'm passionate about. Let me repeat that I made $0 snowboarding, but I still regard it as one of the best things I did with my life because I accomplished something real. I feel like that's what I feel like I accomplished something real. And if I make games that don't make a crap ton of money, but they are true to their vision and there's something that I'm proud of, and I really believed I tried to push the envelope in some respect, I'll be happy with that result. Even if I have to go back to working a job, I'll be happy that I took this period out of my life to do this thing. Just like I'm happy that I took this period out of my life to do that thing. So that's how I look at it. Okay. If you stay in the beginner park, you will be a beginner forever. So this is true. I was not able to, you see these photos here of me holding a grab for a long period of time. That's only really possible on bigger jumps. And so one of the things that I saw when I was a snowboard instructor, and it's kind of why I started to distance myself from a lot of the other snowboard instructors, was they would stay in the beginner park for pretty much like 90% of the day, just hitting little jumps over and over and over again. And then they would always talk about style. Oh, I want this style, I want that style. But none of their stuff looked stylish. And I contend that the reason none of their stuff looked stylish is because they were hitting small jumps. Like, there's this thing that happens when you hit big jumps and you get into the big park and you start doing some of the crazier, more dangerous things. You actually can have style because you're in the air much longer. You can hold a grab. Things are much more slow and fluid. And so you will look like a beginner forever if you stay in the beginner park. There comes a point in time where you're just going to have to sack up and hit the big jumps. And I kind of think that this applies to games. There comes a point in time where you're just going to have to dig in and learn the fundamentals and invest crazy amounts of time into getting good at the thing in order to do things that are outside the range of what anyone could dream is possible. I believe that. So it's not, again, people will accuse me of being a gatekeeper or whatever. I'm not. Go do your beginner park. Everybody needs a beginner park. I needed a beginner park. But what I did eventually was recognize when it's time to move out of the beginner park and into something serious. So I would suggest doing the same. Okay, on to the next thing. Don't think, do the thing and polish it later. So a lot of people who would say, have some vision in their mind of the ideal 360 that they were going to do, the ideal trick, the perfect board slide. I think I've got some rail stuff in here. I actually don't. They think, the perfect board slide, the perfect this, that. And they'd be talking about all this style that they're going to have, but then they wouldn't just practice it. They wouldn't just try it. It's like they thought that if they just talk about the style that they're going to have, that somehow the style would come. Not true. Thank you. Not true. The style comes from reps. That's what I learned in snowboarding. The only way that you get to do the 360 with the sweet grab that you're holding like this, for a really, really long time, is by doing literally thousands of 360s. I am not joking. There is one particular trick that I have done probably 7,000 times. Not joking. It's like this. It's actually the trick in this photo here. This switch under flip 5. I eventually got way more style with that trick. I did that trick thousands of times over the course of many, many, many seasons. And every time I did it, it got better and better and better. And the grab started getting more and more tweaked. And I started doing more and more, having more and more play with it. But you're never going to get to the point where you actually have some style in the thing that you're doing until you put in a lot of reps. So thousands of 360s, okay? And so then the real question becomes, if you want to get good at this, how can you put in so many days of snowboarding that you can get thousands of 360s? Well, that's your problem to solve. That's the real problem to solve. Not, let's talk about how we grab our boards. And it's the same thing, I believe, or I contend, when it comes to working on games, when it comes to trying to push the boundaries in software. You need to find a way to put in the reps to do a lot of serious programming. Not this kind of constructor factory abstract bullshit programming, like real programming. You need to do a lot of it. That's how you get real style. Okay. On to the next one. So do the thing, polish it later. Polish comes from reps. You are the expert of what you know. So I have a story to tell you about. Actually, it was this jump. This is the first jump in Breckenridge. Big park. One day in the morning, I showed up. This would have been probably sometime in January, February. I was just doing laps. I think I showed up a little bit early, so I was hitting the jumps. I was just doing straighters over them. And this guy pulls up next to me. I kind of recognize who it is. And he asks me, hey man, like, what's the speed on this? What's the speed like on this jump? And I kind of explained to him, I'm like, oh, it's like a little bit of like a S kind of, maybe like you go this way. It's like 2 of those. And he's like, thanks, man. And then he goes and hits the jump, whatever. And then it sort of hit me afterwards. I was like, oh my God, like that guy who asked me that question was Andreas Vig. Okay, now some backstory. Andreas Vig was in all these snowboarding movies that I remembered as a young adult. I'd watch these snowboarding movies. I'd see these snowboarding magazines, Andreas Vig. So I knew who the guy was, and he was this amazing pro, and I totally looked up to him. And I just stopped and I was like, whoa, like, why would he ask me? I'm this nobody. Why is he asking me about the speed? But it totally makes sense, right? Because, even though I'm not a pro and I'm not this or that, like at that moment, at that time, in that place, I was the expert on the thing that he needed to know. And so I guess I'm not really sure exactly how this translates, but I did write something down, and I said, what could you only know because of who you are, where you are, or what you've experienced? And how could you share it with others? There might actually be some things that are very special about you in your particular situation that you're not even aware of, that could be really valuable to somebody who you look up to, somebody who you might even judge as like way better than you. So something to consider. The next one is break it in half. So this is all of these tricks, like this 360, for example. This is a technique that I've learned from snowboarding, and I've applied it to so many other things in my life. You can basically take any complicated task, and you can just break it in half. So the trick that I did in this photo, the backside 360, okay? I learned that trick by breaking it in half. I learned how to do backside. So there's a backside 180 and then a switch frontside 180. So those two 180s, you put them together and then you get a 360. So if you learn separately how to do those two 180s, then it becomes much easier to put them together in the whole trick. And I actually do like a lot of indoor climbing these days now because it's very compatible with my current lifestyle. And a lot of these climbing problems that I'll do at the climbing gym are very similar. There's something where you look at it, and maybe what I can do is I can get the first section separate from the second section, and then I can work both of them separately, and then eventually I can kind of put them all together, right? You can break that climbing problem in half. And this applies, of course, in game programming. Take any seemingly complicated problem that you're trying to solve, you can usually break it in half in one respect or another, and that will lead you to solving it. So that's a lesson I learned from snowboarding. Everyone deals with the same conditions. So snowboarding contests are rarely canceled due to weather. This basically never happens. It's sort of a running joke between me and my friends. I would go to some of these contests, and it's just like it's snowing sideways. You can't see anything. And you would think to yourself, well, how could you hit a jump like that if you can't see anything? That's crazy. Well, we just kind of had to train ourselves to do that. That's really all I can tell you. And the lesson that I got from it was everybody deals with the same conditions. So if something is bothering you and you're competing with somebody else, just realize that your competition is dealing with the same thing. Right now we're dealing with this like fabulously broken software ecosystem that's driving me nuts. I'm sure it drives a lot of people nuts, but the thing is, your competition is dealing with that too. And so if you can gain just a slight edge over them by adapting to it, that can prove to be really good for you. And I think it can make the difference between edging them out of the game completely, or just setting up your own like space for yourself. I don't think game development is really all that competitive. actually. I think it is more like, it's not a zero-sum game like snowboard competitions are, but everybody is dealing with those same conditions, and there does come I guess what I learned was there's a lot of things that seemed impossible to me. Like, how am I going to hit this big jump when I could barely see the light? How can I hit this jump when there's like, I can barely get enough speed, etc., etc. Eventually, I learned to just stop complaining and just plow through it and figure it out. And that's my approach to software as well. So, so here's a comment. Modern web stack just drove me nuts for 8 hours straight. Yep, it sucks. It's awful. But your competition is dealing with it too. So if you can figure out how to gain an edge, okay. Commit or quit. So I think this one actually applies in a lot of different levels. It doesn't just apply on the level of, say, doing a trick. A trick in snowboarding is very much a commit or quit kind of a situation. You know what you're going to do before you go up to the jump. You're prepared. You're thinking about it. And there comes a moment where you just decide, I've got to get enough speed to hit this jump. I've got to commit to this particular body motion. In the most insane thing I've ever done, doing a double backflip, I literally have to commit to going like this, and looking up twice and seeing the world spin around me twice. And if you can't commit to doing that, what are you even there for? Really, what are you doing there, right? Why don't you just go home? They say go big or go home. I think that doesn't quite capture what I want to say. It's more like commit or quit. Even if you're going there, even if your goal today is just to do a 180, if you can't commit to trying that 180, then you should probably go home. Because that's why you're there, And if you do that 180 and you're happy and you're stoked, enjoy the moment, like go hang out with your friends, like be happy, but like actually come with a goal, commit to doing it, do it, and leave. So commit or quit. This applies also, and eventually it applied at the level for me of snowboarding itself, and is sort of the reason that I don't do it as much as I used to, is because I had to commit to something new for my career. And that means that I had to quit this other thing that was taking up so much of my attention and focus. And so I had to commit to game development. I had to commit to finishing a project, a real project. And that meant that I had to quit something else. So it can apply at a lot of different levels, I think. Okay. You will never be satisfied. Learn to live with it. This happened. So you see these tricks. It was actually this same jump here that I'm going to tell a story about the day that I landed the double backflip, the biggest thing I ever did. Okay, so it actually was this jump that I did it on. This would have been in like 2011-ish time frame, and I had been really psyching myself up for it. I had been practicing it. For years, actually, the year before, my friends were doing it, and I wanted to do it, and I had all this practice, and I was like, I'm going to do this. And it was one of those things where I would kind of like lie awake at night with sweats, just thinking about how scary it was going to be to do it. And eventually, one day, I actually decided to do it, and I practiced it, and I got ready, and I was there, my friends were there, and I landed it, and we all were cheering and hugging, and I rode down to the chairlift, and then I got on the chairlift, and immediately the next thought that popped into my mind was, okay, Ted, what's next? And I was starting to think about, if I did like a switch, double backflip thing, and if I started to put them together or whatever. And then this other thought popped in my mind. It was like, are you insane? Like, why can't you just enjoy the moment? Like, this is completely messed up. Like, you just did the biggest thing that you've ever done in your life. And the first thing you do is you're like off to what's next, But what it really made me realize was that's just our nature. It's not ever something that I am going to have control over. I can't conquer that thing that's buried deep inside me that just wants to keep going, and it wants to, can't just be satisfied with, you did the double backflip, like, yay, be happy. And I was very happy. It's not that I wasn't very happy. It's just that it's interesting to me how quickly all of that moment of joy turned into a thing about what's next. And so here's a comment. Yeah, similar to when you finished the first game. And that also was the case with me and Moose Solutions. And so I already knew before I launched, because of this experience, I already knew before I launched that game that it was going to be something like that. It was going to be this moment of great joy and happiness, and it wouldn't be all that long before my mind would go into the next thing, and I'd start to be thinking about the next thing. When I say this, I'm not trying to cast judgment on it. I think that's not the right way to look at it, actually. I think the right way to look at it is more like, this is who we are, this is what our nature is, and if you can learn to accept it, if you can learn to just notice it for what it is, then I think you don't have to take yourself so seriously all the time. It's like, yeah, go make the next game. Like, yeah, go do the next trick, but you don't always have to be so serious about it. You don't have to let your own ambition get in your way and turn you into this monster. Yeah, keep working towards the things, keep doing them, but enjoy the moment, because if you're thinking too much about yourself when you're doing it, then you can't just really be there and enjoy what you've actually accomplished. So that was that lesson for me. And that kind of goes into the last thing that I want to say, which is all greatness is temporary. The snow will melt and nobody will know what took place here. So I want to tell another story about a place that, I'm not going to say who this is, and I'm not going to say where it is, but it's a place that's near a ski resort where I used to live. And it's in the summertime, if you go mountain biking there's a trail, and it's this beautiful climb up the mountains. And actually, a lot of times I'll go there in the fall, like right before the winter, before it snows. And you mountain bike up through these trees, and just before you get to the clearing where you can see the mountains, there's this, it looks like a shrine of some sort. It's got wind chimes, and it's got this discarded ski equipment, and you can just hear the wind blowing through the leaves, and you can hear the sound of the chimes, and you can look at this box that people left for him. They left little notes and things for this guy. He was a pro skier at one point who he lost his life in a competition, and I'm not going to say who or how or what happened, but it's a very striking image to me, because every time I go up there and I see that, and sometimes I stop, sometimes I don't, but there's no snow around, right? It's in the summertime, or it's in the fall, or it's that kind of time of year. And I'm looking out over the mountains, and I can just see just hills, rolling hills. And it occurs to me that if you knew nothing about who this guy was, or what things we built in the snow here, how big these things were, how big these jumps were, how big this thing was, what it looks like in its prime in the winter, it all just melts away every year. And if you weren't there, you would have no idea it ever existed. And in the summer, it's like you have no idea. Right in that very same spot, there was all this greatness. And then it just melts away. And I think about that, because that's really what it's like with any great thing that you do. And so I suppose, the only difference between this guy who has a memorial and me is I'm still here to tell the story of what we did there, and he's not. And I guess all I can say is, if you can't find some way to enjoy that moment of greatness when you're in it, that's really sad because it goes away, it all fades, it all changes into the next thing. So that's all I'm going to say. I'll just stop there. If anyone has any questions or anything else, I'd be happy to chat for a little bit. Yeah, so here's a comment. I think many game devs enjoy the enjoyment that they give others. And that's exactly how I feel about it too. You know, my last game wasn't really all that popular, but on the handful of times when when I get a random person that discovers the game and they're just so excited about it and they show up in my Discord and they send me messages and they're playing it and they're like just enjoying it, it's such a good feeling to me. I'm just really happy that I could entertain someone like that and that they got some value out of it. So yeah, remembering my first feedback I got on a game dev jam and people were really excited. Yeah, I guess maybe the thing I'm trying to get at is like, sure, it's great if you can find a way to make a living doing these things. That's wonderful. If you can somehow get to a point where you can achieve that, that's a lovely thing. But the way I look at it and the way I looked at snowboarding was, you know, unlike everything else I did in my life, where it was like, you know, you take a math test and you take an English test and you take a test and, you know, you do you're tested umpteen times. I never did anything in snowboarding because it would be on a fucking test. I just wanted to do it. I was just interested in it. And you couldn't really pay me. I mean, you could pay me. I would take your money, but I wasn't doing it for that. And I think it's a similar thing with games. It's not something I do. I want to do something that people would want to pay money for. Don't confuse them. But if it doesn't work out that way, I'm not totally crushed. And I think that's just, I don't think a lot of people have that same perspective on it, really. I think there's a lot of just kind of crass commercialization of things. And, you know, it's not 100% imperative to me that I support my lifestyle through games that I make. Because I know that I can make money all kinds of ways. I did make money all kinds of ways. I had so many odd jobs. My God, did I have I've had so many odd jobs. I've had so many odd jobs in my life that it's like a running gag between me and my partner. He's always, I'll tell him about some job I had and he's like, wait, another one? You know, it's like the freelance writing and working at restaurants and like there was a time when I sold this. I helped a guy like sell used camera equipment on eBay. And I worked at the call center at my university to try and, you know, get donations out of people. I had so many jobs, and I just look at it like, all right, if there comes a day where I need to get another one, I'll just get another one. I don't care, because I'm going to do what I want to do, and the jobs are just how I support it. And if the thing makes money, I eventually did find some ways to make money, not directly out of snowboarding, but by doing things that used my snowboarding knowledge. One thing I did is I made an iPhone app for snowboarders and for skateboarders. Actually, I think I've got it right here on my phone, so I can show you. It's called Skate Dice. And I have a snowboarding version as well, but I'm showing the skate one. So this comes up with a random trick to try, right? And it's on your iPhone. And I made this app, and I wouldn't have made it if I didn't snowboard. And actually, this app, just by supporting it over the years, has probably made me maybe $10,000, something like that, maybe $15,000. Not a lot of money, but you can do something with that kind of money. So it's not to say that I'm completely against making money on all these things. It's just that when I set out to do it, I don't have that expectation. What I'm trying to do is just do it to the best of my abilities. And if it happens to be the case that it's very successful, then so much the better. So here's another comment. While making Balatro, Local Thunk tried to shield himself from the realization that it would make money. He was just trying to make a game for himself and his friends. I think that's such a great thing to do. Yeah, I think it's good to have awareness of what kinds of things sell. I think that's a useful thing to do. But if that drives all of the decisions that you're making, then you're just going to end up making something that you yourself don't want to work on, and that sucks. And then I also would think that that probably won't end up doing well because it won't have the same kind of passion in it that you would put into it by caring so deeply about the vision of it. So anyway, this has been really fun. This is actually one of my favorite things to talk about, and I'm so happy that I got to share this with you, and I will see you next time.